Your mother stops blinking. Your father stops speaking. By midnight, the whole town is frozen, staring at light that hovers over the road. The door behind you opens. A voice whispers, "We'll come back for you."
What's that? You want to be scared? Come with me. You will experience tales of horror, ghosts, and death. It is not recommended for the weak at heart. Listen in the dark. It's more fun that way. This is Weekly Spooky.
Hello, my spookies. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. It's time for a little spooky in your weekly. I'm your host and narrator Enrique Couto, and tonight we're heading off to a small town that no longer exists, and we are going to find out why. But first, I want to thank you so much for joining us on our spooky excursions even after Halloween is over. Because here at Weekly Spooky, Halloween is a way of life, not a date on the calendar. And we have so many scares coming for you this holiday season. So make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcasting app. And make sure to come back on Friday as we drop a massive Thanksgiving horror story compilation. And of course, next Wednesday, we have a brand new Thanksgiving horror story, courtesy of David O'Hanlon. This episode is brought to you by Savorista Coffee. Head to savorista.com and use promo code SPOOKY to get 25% off your first order. We really appreciate all the spookies who are supporting Savorista. When you use our code, it supports the podcast directly. So if you want delicious, premium, high-grade coffee without the caffeine jitters, head to savorista.com and use promo code SPOOKY. But now, as for tonight, imagine a quiet Midwestern town where the loudest sound is wind through the corn. Now imagine the wind stopping and the people stopping with it. What if the neighbors you trust became watchers and the rescue at your door wasn't meant for you? What if the map erased your hometown because something else wrote its name there first? Tonight, we head to a place that no longer exists and discover the secret that made it. I'm from a small town that no longer exists, by Michael Kelso. I'm from a small Midwestern town I'm sure you've never heard of, and you never will. It wasn't even a dot on the map, just 761 people on their own, in the middle of nowhere. That's why I'm telling this story, so that someone knows what happened here. I remember as a kid, we used to play in the cornfield all the time. We lived on a farm just outside of town. The sidewalk literally began 1 block away from our house. It wasn't much. A single main street with a general store, drugstore, and a hardware store. The grocery store and diner were around the corner just off of the main street. The only reason we had a post office was because the nearest town was 20 miles away. It was the kind of place even Norman Rockwell would miss if he drove through. My brother and sister and I didn't have a lot of toys or games, so we played hide and seek almost non-stop with a few of the other neighborhood kids. We tried playing around the house, but With there usually being 6 or 7 of us, it was just too easy. The best time was during the summer, after the corn got above our heads. Nobody wanted to be the seeker then, because it was literally impossible to find anyone. Games would go on for hours with no one found. Our mom would have to come out and yell for us to come in for meals. The best part of hiding was when the seeker walked right past you. The excitement and sheer terror as you held your breath and tried to stay as still as possible. It was incomparable. I'd nearly pee my pants if the seeker stopped right beside me. There was that moment when you didn't know if they had no clue where you were, or if they knew and were just toying around with you. There were a couple of times when the seeker was indeed toying with me, and they would just stop right beside me, right where I was hiding, then take a step or two and lunge back and grab me. I screamed both times, not the "oh, you got me" squeal that kids do. I mean serious, blood-curdling, everyone is trying to murder me scream. My mother came running to make sure I was okay, and I got in trouble for scaring her so badly. I usually had to sit out the next turn as punishment, watching the cornstalks sway and bend as the pursuers hunted down their prey. The fun suddenly changed when the strangers came to town. I remember there were a lot of strangers around during that time in my life. By strangers, I don't mean people who act odd. They acted much more than odd. Remember when you were a kid and you dressed up as a superhero? This was the same, only these people seemed to be dressed up, pretending to be people. It was weird. We would go to town and some of them would just be standing around, pretending to be nonchalant. They were staring at nothing. Not the 1,000-mile stare some people have, but literally staring at the strangest things. An old man in a rocking chair in front of the general store would sit staring at an unlit streetlight in the middle of the day. A man leaning against a door frame was staring at his hand as though he had never seen it before. Odd things like that became more and more commonplace, and the people who lived in the town their entire lives started to notice as well. The strangers were approached and asked who they were and where they were from. They would answer without taking their eyes off the object they were focused on. They said they were from a ways off and were traveling to their homeland. That seemed to appease people for a while. Weeks later, when they were still hanging around, folks started to get anxious. My parents told us kids that the strangers were down on their luck and hadn't done anything wrong. That's what they said to our faces, but behind closed doors, I got the feeling they weren't so optimistic. I went to the bathroom one night and had to pass my parents' bedroom to get there. I overheard them talking about the strangers, and Dad saying he would keep the gun loaded in case they ever came around. It seemed odd that these strangers had never done anything wrong, and yet were the subject of such hushed tones and conversations spoken in fear. I remember when our neighbor, Mr. Hutchins, went missing. He was a nice older man in his 60s or 70s, I think. He always gave out full-size candy bars on Halloween. He used to be out every morning early tending to his animals. We'd see him when we were on our way to school, and he'd always wave to us. One morning, he just wasn't there. We didn't think much of it at the time. We thought maybe he was sick or something. In the evening, he wasn't there either. We told Mom about it, but she said he was probably in town getting groceries or farm supplies. The next morning, when we went to school, there was still no Mr. Hutchins. When we told Mom after school, she decided to go visit in case he had fallen. When there was no answer at the door and the animals were out roaming, Mom decided it was time to call the sheriff. Mom tried to shoo us inside when the sheriff's car showed up, but we went upstairs to Bobby's room and watched out the window. The sheriff knocked and called for Mr. Hutchins, then went inside. He was in there for a long time. We started thinking one of Mr. Hutchins' dogs had chewed him up or something when the sheriff finally came back out. He got into his car and used the radio. The next thing we know, 3 more sheriff's cars show up, and they start going in and out of the house and barn like a swarm of angry bees. I never could have imagined what they found. We asked Mom about it at supper, and she wasn't too pleased that we had been snooping. Dad was out of town doing his deliveries, but he would have told us to mind our own business and stay out of others' affairs. Mom told us the sheriff didn't know where Mr. Hutchins had gone to, but his truck was still there, so he couldn't have gotten far. They said he might have had a spell and wandered off. They looked for him for 2 days. Then suddenly, he showed up at his house, as if nothing had happened. We were happy he was back, but curious where he'd been. After he came home, he just sat on his porch and stared at the tree in his front yard. We went over to visit him and asked him where he'd been. He just kept staring at the tree like we weren't even there. "Mr. Hutchins?" I said. "Yes," he said, staring at the tree. "How are you, sir?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. His stare never wavered. Finally, he replied, "Good." "We were wondering where you had gone, sir," Bobby said. "I was..." He seemed to struggle with the right word. "Away." "Well, we're glad you're back, sir," Candace said. "Do you need any help with your animals?" "Animals," he repeated, as if the word was unfamiliar to him. "Yes, sir, taking care of your animals like we've done before," she said. He didn't reply, just stared at the tree. I looked at Bobby and Catherine. They both seemed as shocked as I was that he was ignoring us. We'd always been on good terms with Mr. Hutchins. There were times we would help out around his farm and with his animals. He would reward us with some money or some treats, but always he was grateful for the help. I waved my hand in front of his eyes, and he didn't blink. We shook our heads and walked away. When we got home, we told Mom how he was acting. We told her we thought something was wrong with him, like he was sick. Mom told us to leave him alone, that he'd had a hard time, and we shouldn't be pestering him. But we soon had more to worry about. We played hide and seek all weekend when we weren't doing our chores. It was the last fun weekend of my childhood. We went to school on Monday and got a nasty shock. One of my classmates and buddies that I hung with was Mike. When I got to class, Mike was already in his seat, staring at the blackboard. "Morning, Mike," I said. He didn't move or speak. "What's up with you?" I asked. "You stay up too late last night?" "No," he said, still staring. "So what's with the zombie routine?" I said. "You practicing for Halloween?" "No," he said, not blinking. "Okay, so you're playing a joke on me. Ha ha, very funny. You can return to Earth now, Zombie Mike." He didn't move and stopped talking. "Whatever, man," I said, and let him play his game. All through class, he didn't say a word, even when the teacher called on him. He just sat there and stared at the board. She chided him for ignoring her, but then, when she came over to his desk and waved her hand in front of his eyes, he didn't blink. "Mike?" she said. He didn't answer. "I haven't seen him move in over an hour," I explained. She took him to the nurse, mumbling that maybe he'd had a stroke. When the teacher returned, she was alone and very rattled. She made us read for the rest of the period, while we heard her out in the hallway discussing Mike's odd behavior with another teacher. Mike never came to class that day. When class ended, I approached her. "How's Mike?" I asked. She seemed nervous. I'm not sure," she said. "Is he okay?" "I don't know," she said, getting up and walking to the door. "If you want to know any more about him, you'll have to ask his parents." She held the door open as I walked through it, then shut it and went back to her desk. I saw her pick up her phone. She didn't look very happy as she talked. I went home confused and concerned for my friend. I asked Mom if I could go over to Mike's house to check on him. She told me to go over and come back in an hour for supper. As I walked down the street towards Mike's, I saw more people standing around staring at nothing. It was like they had paused in the middle of whatever they were doing and found something extremely interesting. It was creepy. When I knocked on Mike's door, his mom answered. "Oh, hey, Bill," she said. "Mike isn't feeling well right now." "I know," I said. "I saw him at school today, and he was acting weird. I just wanted to check and see if he was okay." She glanced inside the house. I don't know if you would call it okay or not." "Is he still acting like a zombie?" I said, expecting her to laugh. She shot me a horrified look. "Maybe you should come in and see for yourself." I stepped inside, and she led me back to his room. He was standing there, in the middle of the floor, looking up at the light fixture. It wasn't even turned on. "Hey, buddy," I said. "Just came by to see how you're doing." "Good," he said, still staring. I was a little worried about you, the way you were acting at school today." He stood silent. "Okay, Mike, whatever game you're playing, you win. Now it's time to snap out of it and be normal again." His gaze slowly slid down from the light and landed on me. "Normal?" he said slowly. "Yeah, normal. You know, like everyone else." He didn't answer, but his stare freaked me out. It was like he was looking at me, but not looking at me at the same time. "You know what, Mike? I've had it with this stupid game. If you don't quit it, we're not friends anymore." "Friends?" he said, staring through me. "Yes, friends. You and I have been friends for years, and you know that." He stood silent and unmoving. "Okay, I'm done," I said, walking out of the room. His mom followed me. "Are you really not going to be friends with him anymore?" she asked. "I was trying to get him to quit playing," I said, peeking around the corner to see Mike staring at the spot where I had been standing. "Did the nurse say anything about what could have happened?" "She said it might have been a stroke, but his vital signs say everything is fine." "This is too weird," I said. "He's acting just like..." "Like who?" she said as I rushed out the door. "Like who?" she called after me. I ran to Mr. Hutchins' house and found him sitting on the porch. He was staring at the tree like the day we came to talk to him. "Mr. Hutchins?" I said. "What happened when you disappeared?" He didn't respond. "Mr. Hutchins!" I said, grabbing him and giving him a little shake. "I need to know." His head slumped forward. I jumped back. "Mr. Hutchins?" I said, slowly approaching him again. I reached for his neck to feel for a pulse. I waited a long time before realizing there was none. As I pulled my hand away, he grabbed it. I jumped, trying to get away, but his grip was too strong. He stared into my eyes. "Normal," he said in a raspy voice that I didn't recognize. Then he slumped over again. When he released me, I ran home. "Mom! Mom!" I said as I burst in the door. "Billy, what is it?" "It's Mr. Hutchins." "Has he gone missing again?" she said. "No, I think he's dead." She stopped making supper and turned slowly toward me. "Dead?" "Yes." "How do you know?" I explained what happened with Mike and how I went to Mr. Hutchins' house after. I told her what happened there, and she got this far-off look. "Stay here," she said, walking out of the door. I watched her walk over to Mr. Hutchins' house. I saw her look at the body. Then I saw her cover her mouth and run home. When she burst in the door, she went straight for the phone and called 911. Within 15 minutes, there were just as many flashing lights at his house as the day he went missing. The sheriff asked me some questions about it. I don't think he believed me about the grabbing and talking part. He said Mr. Hutchins had been dead for hours. When he was done, we finally had supper. None of us talked much, except for asking to pass the food. After supper, I went to my room and lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling and wondering What was going on? Before I knew it, I had fallen asleep. When I woke up, I was surprised that I was still in my clothes from the day before and had slept on top of my blanket. Usually, if I fall asleep like this, Mom comes in and covers me up. She must have been tired last night from all the excitement. I got up and went out to the kitchen. There was no one there and nothing cooking. That in itself was odd. Mom was always the first one up in the morning, cooking breakfast. Even if we had just cereal, she was up making coffee for her and Dad. It was eerie walking into a dark kitchen and getting my own cereal. I expected her to show up at any moment, but she never did. Bobby and Catherine stumbled into the room and got their breakfast too. "Is Mom sick or something?" Catherine asked. "I don't know. Maybe she's just upset from the whole Mr. Hutchins thing," I said. Bobby just sat and munched on his cereal, half awake. We finished breakfast and got ready for school. Still no Mom. I went to their bedroom and peeked inside. Dad and Mom were both laying in bed. So, I let them sleep. That school day was completely surreal. Half the kids were out sick. I'd never seen anything like it, except on the first day of deer season. Even a couple of the teachers just sat there, staring like Mike had. They didn't talk to us all day. We just sat there, reading or talking quietly to each other, hoping that no one would be loud enough to break the teacher out of her stupor. I knew something was wrong. The strangers had done something to make these people into these weird zombies. I wish I had another word for it because I hadn't seen anyone trying to attack or bite anyone else. At least, not yet. They just hang around like zombies before they attack. I just hoped the attack would never come. When we got home from school that day, Mom and Dad were still in bed. I went into their room and stood beside them. Mom's eyes were wide open, staring at the wall. "Mom," I said, "are you okay?" "Yes," she said without blinking. "Is Dad okay?" "Yes." "Have you been in bed all day?" She didn't answer. "Are you going to cook supper?" She didn't answer. I waved my hand in front of her face, and she didn't blink. "Please, Mom. Please snap out of it. We need you." For the slightest moment, her eyes met mine, and a single teardrop fell from her eye. Then she went back to staring at the wall. I went out and told Bobby and Catherine that they were still in bed, and I didn't think they'd be coming out anytime soon. "Should we call someone?" Catherine asked. "Like who?" Bobby said. "I don't know, the doctor maybe?" she thought. "Okay," I said, pulling out the phone book and looking up the number for the doctor. I dialed and waited as it rang and rang. "No one's answering," I said. "Who else can we call?" she replied. "We used to ask Mr. Hutchins for help when we needed it," Bobby solemnly said. A horrible thought suddenly struck me. You don't think Mom and Dad will end up, I said, unable to finish the sentence. Like Mr. Hutchins? Catherine said. I nodded. Bobby started to cry. We don't know that'll happen, Catherine said. Mr. Hutchins was old, much older than Mom and Dad. Bobby sniffled a few times and stopped crying. So what do we do now? He asked. Let's make some sandwiches for us and for Mom and Dad. We can take them in and see if they're hungry, I suggested. We did exactly that, but neither of them responded. They just laid in bed, staring at the walls. The three of us ate our sandwiches and put ourselves to bed. We agreed to call the doctor again in the morning, and if he didn't answer, we'd call the sheriff. None of us went straight to sleep that night. We were too worried about Mom and Dad. I was also worried about Mike. This whole thing seemed like it was something out of a late-night movie. I couldn't imagine it being real. I kept trying to pinch myself to wake up from this bad dream. Before I knew it, I could hear my brother and sister's breathing settle into the rhythm of sleep. I smiled for the first time in a while, listening to them in peaceful slumber. As I listened, I heard another sound. Floorboards creaking. I froze at the thought of a burglar breaking in and Dad not being able to do anything about it. The steps came closer. I huddled under my blanket for protection. The door creaked open. I snuck a glance and felt immediate relief. It was Mom. She was still dressed in her nightgown. She moved slowly to Catherine's bed and lifted her up. She turned and carried her out of the room. Then Dad came in and carried out Bobby. I got up and followed. Mom? Dad? I said. Where are you taking them? Mom already had the door open and was walking outside. Dad stopped and looked at me. Don't worry, he said. We'll come back for you. Then they walked out into the cool night. My blood froze. I didn't know where they were going, but I knew I didn't want to go there. I threw my shoes on and stepped outside. As I flew down the stairs, I saw a strange light at the end of our driveway. There were two silhouettes in it, and they were heading back toward the house. I squinted against the light, trying to see if it was my parents, or whatever those things were that looked like my parents. As the figures grew closer, I could see they were empty-handed. I stood in the middle of our yard, frozen with fear. I didn't know what to do. If I went back inside, they would find me and take me to be turned into a zombie, too. I couldn't run to Mr. Hutchins' house. Running to town would leave me wide open to be chased. I turned round and round in a panic, looking for options. The barn was an option, but not a good one. There weren't many places to hide there. Then it hit me. Hiding places. Where was my best hiding place? I ran into the cornfield. It was nearly harvest time, and the corn was as tall as it was going to get. It was dark, and would be even darker in the rows. The only light came from the house and whatever was at the end of our driveway. I threw myself into the forest of green stalks and ran. Partway in, I stopped and realized what I'd done. I had run in a straight line, making myself an easy target. I refocused on my usual hide-and-seek strategy. I started from where I was, counted a certain number of rows up, and a certain number over. I was careful to move slowly and disturb the cornstalks as little as possible. I duck-walked, staying as low to the ground as possible and moving as quietly as I could. I was near where I wanted to hide when something in my head told me to stop where I was. It was almost totally dark. The lights from the house and that thing cast strange shadows at the base of the corn. I could barely see a few feet in front of me. I resisted the urge to sit down and instead stayed in my crouched position on my toes so I could be ready to bolt at a moment's notice. I settled into my spot and focused on slowing my breathing. My adrenaline fought against me, telling me to run and never stop. I pushed those thoughts aside and tried to be as silent as possible. The air was still. There was no wind and nothing moved. Each time I inhaled and exhaled, it sounded like a steam engine chugging to get up a hill. Any movement I made, I heard the creak of the soles of my sneakers. I could even hear my neck muscles as I turned slowly, searching for any pursuers. It was like my body was conspiring against me, bound and determined to get caught. Somehow, over all the racket I was making, I heard a sound. I closed my eyes and focused on listening. For a long moment, there was nothing. I mean, nothing. Not even the nightly crickets were singing. And then, I heard it again. Someone was in the cornfield. They were moving slowly. I tried to tell if it was one or many. At first, I couldn't, but then I heard another sound coming from behind me. They were still a little ways off. I thought they had just entered. I painted a mental picture of how close they were. My mental map showed me one coming from the direction of the house and one from the driveway. As I heard them getting closer, I had to fight to stay still. My mind was screaming at me to run. I knew from so many hide-and-seek sessions that was the worst thing to do. I kept my eyes closed and waited for them to pass by. Then I would sneak out in the other direction. That plan seemed to appease my nerves enough to get them to stop yelling. I heard one of them approaching. They were coming right at me. I could see the stalks beside me moving. But I stayed still. 2 rows before one of my pursuers would have literally run me over. But they stopped. It seemed like there was a moment of indecision, and then they started off again in a different direction. I wanted to breathe a sigh of relief, but the other one was still approaching. They were walking slowly up the row beside the one I was in. They walked right beside me and stopped. I recognized my dad's boots. I just didn't know what was wearing them now. He turned towards me. I knew I was done. There was nowhere I could run that he wouldn't catch me. I kept my eyes closed, refusing to move, even to look up at the man I called father, or what he had become. He stood there, unmoving for what seemed like an eternity. Self-preservation was all that kept me from surrendering. I had seen these empty shells of people I used to love, and I wanted to survive to pass the memories of who they were before. He turned and took a step away from me, then another. I wanted to jump for joy. I wanted to run as I'd never ran before. But mostly I wanted to be careful. I remembered the times playing hide and seek when the seeker pretended to walk away, only to turn around and lunge at me. I held my breath as his footsteps continued away from me. I counted to 100 before I would allow myself to move. As I started to sneak away, I saw an ear of corn lying on the ground. I picked it up and threw it as hard as I could in the opposite direction of my escape route. When it landed, I heard both of my pursuers converge on it. I ran quickly and quietly away from them. Before I knew it, I was at the edge of the cornfield near the road. I peeked out and saw the light at the end of my driveway. It didn't look like headlights from a vehicle. It was just a bright light hovering a few feet off the ground. It was so bright I couldn't tell what it was attached to, or if it was attached to anything. At this point, I didn't know what I believed anymore. I just knew someone or something had taken the people I loved and turned them into zombies. No, zombies wasn't right. It was more like robots. They would just stare at whatever until needed. Then they would be called to action, like Mom and Dad. I turned away from the light and ran. It wasn't long until I heard a strange sound. It was like a mechanical scream. It chilled my bones to hear it. It seemed to be coming from behind me. The light was getting brighter, too. I knew it was following me. Dad dashed out of the cornfield and tried to grab me, but I was already out of his reach. I could hear him running behind me when Mom came around the corner, and I nearly ran into her. I have no idea how I avoided her open arms. Maybe somewhere along the line there was some football player genes in me, but I did a stiff arm spin move that would make any running back proud. I ran like my life depended on it, which it did. My legs were burning, my lungs were on fire, I had a stitch in my side, and yet I kept running. My parents and the light chasing right behind me, just waiting for me to trip or make some mistake. I was almost in town when a light shone in front of me. It also hovered just above the ground. I was trapped, with nowhere left to go. I stopped. It wasn't more than a heartbeat until Dad had a hold of me. Mom was right behind him. They each grabbed an arm and turned me around to head back towards the driveway light. At least they were walking, and I could take a breather before being turned into a zombie robot. The light behind us got brighter, and I heard a strange sound from that direction. They sounded somewhat familiar, though. As the light got closer, suddenly my dad started convulsing. He fell to the ground, followed shortly by my mom. Someone ran up and grabbed me. "Come on, kid," a large man said. "Let's get you out of here." I turned from my unconscious parents to the man. He was in a soldier's uniform and holding a taser. He dropped it and ran with me halfway over his shoulder toward the other light. As we got closer, I turned to see it was a helicopter. It touched down just long enough for us to get on and then take off. I watched as we flew over my parents laying there, looking very dead. Could the shock bring them out of it? I asked hopefully. Sorry, kid. It doesn't work that way, he replied. Once they've turned, there's no going back. A tear slid down my cheek as I watched my parents disappear into the distance. I looked back at the house I had lived in my entire life, and hopelessness overwhelmed me. For a fleeting moment, I felt like I would have been better off with them. At least we would all be together as a family. My eyes caught a long line of lights driving into town. What's that? I said, pointing at the lights. Containment, he said. What's that mean? It means we can't let anyone escape who's been infected. Infected? He shrugged. I don't have a better word for it. I thought for a moment. Am I infected? He looked at me. Are you talking? Yes. Are you staring mindlessly at inanimate objects? No. You're not infected. I slumped back in the seat and closed my eyes, happy to be alive, but incredibly sad for those I'd lost. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I woke, we were on a military base. The soldiers were hustling around like ants on an anthill. A man in a suit came over to the helicopter and took me inside. What happened next is a long story that I might tell someday. Suffice it to say for now that, after a long time, I was taken to a foster family who raised me as their own. The town I used to live in ceased to exist. I never saw a single soul from there ever again. I was told I was the only one that was rescued that night before. I don't want to get into that right now. I've tried going back, but it's surrounded by a fence with no trespassing, government property signs posted every 20 feet. It surrounds the entire town. I can see my old house from the fence, but no matter what I do, they won't let me back in. I have to wonder if they don't have the people in there, standing around, staring at nothing, waiting to die. I've searched the internet for any traces of the town. There aren't any. It's like every piece of history, every shred of proof that the town ever existed has been erased. I've talked to others who've heard of similar experiences. The words paranormal, possession, and alien come up the most for possible explanations, but I wonder if it isn't something deeper than that, if it isn't something so sinister that explanations could be dangerous. Maybe it's for the best. Maybe I should just drop the whole thing and move on with my life. I just can't help but wonder what really went on. It's a mystery I need to unravel. For Mom, Dad, Bobby, Catherine, Mike, Mr. Hutchins, and everyone else whose life was erased. First by whoever or whatever did this to them, and then by those who want to cover it up. I posted this to let everyone know about the people who used to be my friends, family, and neighbors. I don't want their memories to be in vain, but mostly I don't want to allow others to fall into the same trap. If you see someone, staring at nothing in particular, and they refuse to speak. Get away from them as soon as you can. They aren't as lost and helpless as you think. How many other tiny towns in the middle of nowhere have suffered the same fate? I wonder. And that's our tour through a town that officially doesn't exist, at least according to the government. Huge thanks to Michael Kelso for tonight's scary story. Make sure to check his work out. You can find his links in the show notes. Now, sharpen your carving knives, my spookies, because this Friday, we're serving our big Thanksgiving compilation. 6 juicy stories, stuffed with chills, drizzled in dread, and perfect for basting the bird or hiding from your relatives. It's a full spooky spread, quick bites, slow burns, and at least one tale you'll swear is staring at you from across the dinner table. Make sure you're subscribed so it lands fresh on your feed, and tell a friend who loves leftovers and maybe some cranberry sauce. And remember, if you love what we're doing here at Weekly Spooky and want to support it in a very direct way, head to weeklyspooky.com/join. Over 90 other spookies have signed up and gotten 2 bonus stories every month for as little as $1. And speaking of, an extra special thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who pay just a little bit more to hear their names at the end of the show. And they are Johnny Nix, Kate and Lulu, Jessica Fuller, Mike Eschewy, Jenny Green, Amber Hansford, Karen Weemet, Jack Kerr, and Craig Cohen. If you want to hear your name at the end of the program, sign up at the $15 or higher tier at weeklyspooky.com/join, or sign up for as little as $1 a month and get 2 bonus episodes every single month. We're happy to be here to give you spooky, even more than just on your weekly. But now, my spookies, it's time for me to get back to it. I have so much to do to prepare for a very, very haunted holiday. So I'll see you all back here on Friday, and remember, every Tuesday, we're releasing a new program called This Week in Horror History. Make sure to check it out. So for myself, for my executive producers Rob Fields and Bobbletopia.com, my producer Dan Wilder, and my creepy composer Ray Mattis, I'll talk at you next time.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to find your way back next week. But for now, you are safe. Trust me.